Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to our day after a historic meltdown by the Giants review here. Ed Valentine of Big Blue View, along with Tony DelGenio. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Tony, I'm still trying to figure out what happened yesterday. Still trying to figure it out. Have you got all the answers for me?
Oh, I have every answer you could imagine.
All right, then we're naming
something.
GM. Then I'll be head coach, and
I mean, I
you know
think you can summarize it.
Go ahead.
You can summarize it in 3 words: only the Giants.
Absolutely. I just wrote this morning in my things I think column that look when Theo Johnson made that catch, okay, 3rd and 17. Ball bounces through the hands of Wan'Dale Robinson to Theo Johnson. He grabs it and goes 41 yards for a touchdown that puts the Giants ahead by 18 points in the 4th quarter. Lawrence Tynes went on X and said everything has changed for the Giants. We're back and all this stuff. And of course, that obviously didn't age well, but that should have been the moment. You think about epic moments in Giants history. You think about the McConkey Super Bowl moment. You think about the Bavaro moment, dragging 49ers defenders. You think about, was it Lionel Manuel, fighting his way for that epic, I think, 4th and 17 or 18 first down. You just think about all of the epic, great moments for the Giants. And for this team, for this franchise, for, what they've been through the last 10 or 12 years, this should have been the moment. That should have been the moment where everything changed. It really should have been the moment where we said, because that would have been 3 wins in 4 weeks against really good teams. It should have been the moment where we knew that they had come out of the tunnel, come out of the darkness, come out of the wilderness, whatever you want to call it. And instead, they did the most Giants thing imaginable, becoming the first NFL team in 1,603 games to lose when leading by 18 points with less than 6 minutes to play. It's utterly stunning, but it is completely typical. Only the Giants can do this kind of stuff, sort of a loss to try to stomach.
Yep. And I mean, and there were, I think, plenty of ways to prevent it from happening that they did not avail themselves of. And that's the tragic thing about all of this. This was a collapse of their own making, really, in many ways.
Absolutely. And it, I think we'll be trying to dissect the pieces of what went wrong here for as long as we can stomach trying to do it. And look, let's start with Jude McAtomney, okay? And I have to be honest. I feel horrible for the kid, okay? I feel horrible for the kid because, let's be brutally frank, he's not an NFL place kicker. He never has been an NFL place kicker. Rutgers, which was bad at the time, Rutgers watched him kick for a season and then replaced him and refused to use him on anything but kickoffs in his final season in Rutgers. How did the Giants think that Jude McAtomney was going to become an NFL kicker? And, so I feel bad for McAtomney. Obviously, you got to make those kicks if you're in the NFL, but it starts with, maybe this isn't the place I thought I would start, but it starts with with roster construction, roster decisions. And you know, what you and I talked about earlier today is like 3 years of what are the Giants doing and why did they make that decision? And why is this guy on the roster? And why is that guy active or not active? It's 3 years of scratching your head and trying to figure out, you know, why certain people are there and why other people aren't. And it all comes to roost in games like that.
Yeah, and you know, and as far as the kicker situation goes, you know, I mean, you've laid out all the reasons why McAtomney should not have been the game time kicker yesterday or last week when he missed an extra point, also. And the question is, you know, what, you know, aren't there other guys out there? So they had Greg Joseph, for example, kicking for them. I guess it was just last year, right? Okay,
Mhm.
you know, he was okay. He wasn't anything, you know, great. There
Well,
was, yeah, and I don't think he signed with anyone. I don't know whether Bullock, the other guy that they had back in 23, is on a roster now. But there are veteran kickers out there with NFL experience who you could at least trust to make extra points, right?
there's one on the practice. There's one on the Giants practice squad.
And then
You
right, and
know?
then you have right, and so and then you have Young Haku, who, and it's like you know, I think I said yesterday, you know, how bad must he be right now? Because apparently, I mean, he used to be a great kicker. He actually he beat the Giants when he was a Falcon back in 2021, I think, with a last minute or last second field goal at MetLife. And he used to be considered one of the better kickers in the league, but the last year or two, apparently, he's had his problems. Still, he's a guy with NFL experience, you know, and you just wonder
Mhm.
why since you've already got him rostered, you're not using him in a game and giving him a chance to see what he can do. And I just don't get that, you know, given the points you made about Makatomney, why this is happening. And so I think that's just one, you know, one of several aspects of the roster construction that just make you shake your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's let's just talk about the fourth quarter. Okay, let's just talk about the fourth quarter. 33 points given up, I think close to 230 yards given up. Um, you know, it comes back to we have to talk about Shane Bowen. And look, there have been a couple points this year when I thought Bowen was in danger of losing his job. Okay, and he got credit the last couple of weeks by, you know, from some of the players for being willing to listen to them and be more aggressive. But at the end of the game, Shane Bowen made the same mistake. You know, rush 3, drop 8, play soft, leave openings all over the place. He made the same mistake yesterday that he made in week 2 against Dallas, which tells you that really those are his stripes, those are his true colors. And what I don't know when it comes to Shane Bowen, I won't advocate for the guy to be fired. I don't like to do that. But what I don't know, we all saw Brian Burns, you know, hobbling off the field, hobbling to the locker room, loudly questioning, you know, rush 3, drop 8 again. And you have to wonder if the players on that defense can continue to play for Shane Bowen, can continue to look at Shane Bowen and think that he's a guy that can put them in position to, you know, to succeed. And if he's a guy they're willing to give extra effort for. So you have to wonder if the Giants have no choice but to find a different defensive coordinator and to do it right away.
Yeah, and so now we're, you know, we've moved on, at least temporarily, from roster decisions to game decisions. And actually, before I respond to that, since we were just talking about the kickers, there was a good comment in the window here, reminding me that the Giants went for 2 after they missed the first extra point, and then they scored a touchdown and went for 2 after that. And of course, they missed that too. So they were then actually down down 2 extra points instead of having those 2 points. And I think that's another thing that I've never liked.
Those
Like, once you miss an extra point, just kick the extra points after that. Don't try to get the 2 back, because it's fool's gold. So
I agree. It's just chasing points when you don't have to chase points. I think in the end, 2 missed extra points cost the Giants 3 points.
Yeah.
Okay. And 3 points, and you still win the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
You probably still win the game, although who knows, maybe Denver would have found a way to score a touchdown instead of a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
But you cost yourself 3 points. And like I said, when it comes to Bowen, and we're jumping around, and we'll jump back and forth from Shane to Daboll to Bowen because I have to admit, my mind is just cluttered right now, with reasons. And I just don't know how the players in the locker room can look at Shane Bowen and be really willing to buy into what he's trying to sell and to give the kind of effort that's necessary. You look at what Brian Burns did. Brian Burns got that offside penalty at the end of the game, but you watch Brian Burns coming off the field and heading to the locker room, and I'm not going to kill Brian Burns for that. He's playing on one leg. He left the stadium with a boot on his foot. And a guy like Burns, a guy like Dexter Lawrence, these guys, they play their guts out, and I don't know if they can continue to do that when they don't believe in what they're getting from the coordinator.
Yeah, and coming back to the whole idea of rushing 3 and dropping 8, it's made all the worse when you ask yourself, who were the 3?
Absolutely.
Who
were the 8?
Who weren't the 3, right? And the 3 did not include Dexter Lawrence. The 3 did not include Abdul Carter, I believe, right? You had Roy Robertson Harris out there as one of the 3, and it's like, why do you have Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter off the field if you're only good? And
I have to go back. I have to go back and look at that, to be honest with you, Tony, because I was doing the live blog at the end of the game, and I was trying to update on social media, and I was doing about 4 different things. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really notice who was on the field and who wasn't at that point. It was just, it was crazy. But the other part of that is, who were the 8? Forget who were the 3. Right. You've got Dane
Nick
Belton,
Jones,
who played a good game, but you've got Nick Jones back there. Bo Braid back there.
Right.
You've got Tay Banks was probably back there.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trusting,
right,
to win the game for you. I mean, the strength of your football team is Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Darius Alexander, Roy Robertson Harris, that front 7, that pass rush, Bobby Okereke. So, put the pedal to the metal and go play to your strength. Don't try to cover your weakness instead of rely on your weakness. And I just don't get it. I mean, I don't understand how you don't learn. So,
and it's playing not to lose rather than playing to win. I mean, and as you say, you have Bo Braid and Nick Jones on the field, and you don't have Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter on the field. I think back to 2022 and whatever, the issues with Wink Martindale, and I realized there were issues, and it was probably a good idea that they moved on from Wink Martindale. But if you want to talk about his basic philosophy, when the Giants won those 2 huge games in 2022 against Green Bay in London and against Baltimore back at MetLife, what did you have at the end of the game? You had, with the Packers driving for the, whatever it was, tying or winning touchdown, you had Xavier McKinney blitzing the edge against Aaron Rodgers and I think knocking his pass down. When Lamar Jackson was trying to bring Baltimore back, you had the Giants rushing and Kayvon Thibodeau knocking the ball out of his hands, right? I mean, and that's how you win those games. You don't sit back and say, okay, I'll try to prevent them from completing this pass by having all these guys back there to cover. And when you consider, as I think you can infer from your statement, that you don't have your two of your best defensive backs on the field anymore because both Paulson and Debo, right, and Javon Holland had gotten hurt during the game. Okay, and so if your 8 doesn't include a Debo and Holland necessarily because of the injuries, should your response be, well, let's throw 2 guys out there that almost never actually play on anything except special teams, or do you say, well, maybe instead of putting 8 back, maybe we only put 6 or 7 back and have somebody else rushing the passer, since I have
play to our strength.
Have 2 of the best pass rushers on the team, otherwise sitting on the sidelines for that final play, right? So it's like what the philosophy of that is beyond me. And to your larger point, I don't see how Shane Bowen can survive this. I feel like Brian Daboll, whatever his own opinion of that was, I feel like he almost has to make the move or else risk just losing the locker room, at least losing the defensive side of the locker room. And I think he has to do something that indicates that he gets their frustration.
Absolutely. And let's stay on the defensive side for the time being, and we'll get away from rush 3, drop 8. Okay, and let's give Dane Belton some credit for really bringing some physicality yesterday, for making a tremendous stop on the 4th and 2, open field tackle of Cortland Sutton that prevented a touchdown. But we come back to bad decisions and roster management and roster construction, and I want to like Tay Banks. Look, if it comes down to this, Tay Banks is a Maryland kid and I'm a Maryland grad, okay? And I want to like Tay Banks. But dear God, at some point, you've got to put Art Green on the field, or you've got to put Nick Jones on the field. You can't. The very second that Tay Banks stepped on the field on Sunday, Sean Payton started throwing the ball in his direction and running it in his direction because he cannot set the edge. He absolutely, he went inside. Bo Nix went outside, and there were no other defenders out there for the Giants. That was absolutely Tay Banks' job to turn that play back inside, and he didn't do it. And as BBV's Nick Filato pointed out, that has been a consistent part of Tay Banks' game, as a Giant. And it seemed like, I don't know if you noticed this, Tony, but I mean, Banks gave up several completions of 16, 18, 20, 22 yards, something like that. But it seemed like everything that went wrong for the Giants in that 4th quarter on defense, Tay Banks was somewhere in the area or somehow involved in it. Not that you expect him to, I don't know how much you can do about a deflected pass that a guy dives and catches, but that was still Tay Banks' guy that caught that pass.
So I have my list, right, of things for several of the players that I thought were most responsible for the collapse. And you've already mentioned, I think, just about everything. But as you said, he lost the outside contain on Bo Nix's touchdown run, 18 yards touchdown run, right? And as Nick says, that happens to him a lot, right? He got beaten by Cortland Sutton, and granted, Cortland Sutton is one of the better receivers in the NFL, and he's a big guy. He's got, I wouldn't mind having Cortland Sutton as a Giant, okay? But he got beat by Sutton on a 22-yard completion that instead of making Denver kick a really, really long field goal to win the game, set them up to kick a 39-yard field goal to win the game. Got them, they were, I think before that play, they were going to have to kick it from 60 yards to win it. And it's entirely possible they would have won it anyway. But getting down to the 21-yard line instead of the 43-yard line before you have to make that kick is a big
right. That would have been a 61-yard kick from there. And if you get beat on a 61-yard kick, you just okay.
Yeah.
But still, but again, he's right in the middle of it.
Yeah. And again, you're right. And the third thing, right. And again, the deflected pass. And the thing is, when I watched the play, as you say, it was his man, okay, and the pass was not to his man. The pass, I can't remember whether the pass was to Mims or Sutton. I can't remember who it was, but Cordale Flott had deflected the pass, and the thing that I made a note of watching it, the replay, is that Banks just stands there watching it after the pass is deflected, while his man Franklin dives for it. And I said, that's the Tay Banks experience in a nutshell, is that he just doesn't have football smarts or football instincts, and he watches while other players make plays and doesn't think, oh, I can make a play on that, and of course it's a split-second thing you've got to do. But Troy Franklin had the instincts to go dive for that ball, and Tay Banks sat there or stood there watching it happen without even attempting to go for it. And you just see him do that stuff over and over and over again when he has a chance at least to try to make a play. If he had gone for that ball himself, at least he could have disrupted Franklin from catching it. I'm not saying he could have caught it, but he could have disrupted Franklin.
Maybe you knock it down. I don't know.
Maybe you knock it down. Maybe you just block Franklin from getting to it. And so it's just one of the many things that really frustrates you about Banks, and that I think right now make him pretty unplayable, except in garbage time situations.
I go back to, all right, Tay Banks got a really good defensive backs coach in Jerome Henderson. Tay Banks, the way he played last year and the way he behaved, Tay Banks got Jerome Henderson fired. Okay. And there's no other way to put it. Tay Banks got Henderson fired. And I remember in the spring last year talking to Jerome Henderson about Tay Banks. And Jerome Henderson said flat out, he said, Tay Banks football 101 has to improve. And that's just it. He doesn't really understand. He has all the physical ability in the world, which, by the way, is why he's got the speed, the size, the power, all that, which is, by the way, what makes him a pretty good kick returner, because all you have to do is catch the ball, run like crazy, and find the hole.
Yep.
It's not quite that simple, but he has the physical ability to do that. He doesn't have the, as we've been talking about, it's the instincts, it's the knowledge, it's the being able to look and see and know what's going to happen. And that's the thing that separates a guy like Banks from a guy that really succeeds.
And it's not just the knowledge, it's the awareness that he doesn't have it. So he was actually, I was reading one of the articles about the game, and he acknowledged that he was beaten by Sutton on that 22-yard pass play. But then he said, but other than that, I thought I played well. He didn't seem to realize even that he was the one who let Bo Nix score by not setting the edge.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't seem to realize that it was the guy that he was covering in the end zone who dove for the deflected ball and caught it for a touchdown, and he didn't even try to do it. And so these plays that are just like about football IQ, he doesn't even seem to realize that he's not making those plays, right? And that's even worse than not making them, is not even being aware that you haven't played well.
Absolutely. And there's comments there's remarks in the comments here that Banks probably shouldn't get a uniform and going forward. And I can't disagree with that, but that's And that's kind of sad because the Giants already have a first round pick who hasn't been able to get a uniform this year. And that goes back to roster management, roster construction, drafting, and the general manager and all of that.
So, just an interesting point about that though, that I've been thinking about, a little bit, is that a lot of the times we come back to those early drafts of Joe Schoen and the 2022 draft in particular. He had all of those draft picks, and you say, well, what do the Giants have to show for all of those draft picks? And of course, Evan Neal was the big bust, but Thibodeau, although he didn't play well yesterday, I felt Thibodeau has been a good player for them this year. But I'm looking at and Azudo was a disaster, as was who else? Marcus McKethan, but that was a low round draft pick. However, I look at the rest of that draft, and it's like all of a sudden, Wan'Dale Robinson is looking like a pretty darn good NFL receiver. I mean, he was always a nice, I would say Wan'Dale Robinson was a nice, that in quotes, right, possession receiver, but not somebody you draft in the second round. Now he's a guy that's making explosive plays, right, for them, and you realize, how important the quarterback is to your impression of a receiver. I mean, I've just, my eyes have really been opened about the type of player that he can be. And he was one of those 2022 draft picks. Cordale Flott, whom I'd never even heard of when they drafted him in 2022. He's one of their better cornerbacks. And he's somebody who does actually try to contest the ball, right? And I mean, I like Cordale Flott, and I think he's now a starting caliber cornerback in the NFL. You look at Daniel Bellinger, who I really liked his first year, and then all of a sudden he disappeared off the map after his injury, and they decided not to use him. But now you could make a case that Daniel Bellinger should be tight end one on the Giants. I mean, they're hitting him a little bit more, and he makes the catches, and I love Dane Belton is a guy who's, I think, up and down, but Dane Belton also makes some plays sometimes for you, and so they're actually and Micah McFadden, who of course was injured, but he also was starting to really come into his own, and so I look at that and I say, well, it's like, these guys now are in their fourth year, and many of them are finally kind of starting to show things. And I say, well, maybe you need to have patience with some of these more recent draft picks. The problem is that I think these more recent draft picks are then forced into the lineup, and some of them just aren't ready. Maybe Tay Banks in 2 years will be a good NFL cornerback, but right now you can't be playing him, I think. Right. And it's a long time to wait, and maybe you can't wait that long, but maybe he just needs more work, and maybe Jalen Hyatt needs more work. Although Jalen Hyatt was open yesterday on that deep ball, and unfortunately Dart just slightly overthrew him on it. But I have to remind myself, though, that sometimes you have to give players time to develop. But then that in turn means that you need to spend some money to get veterans in who will play while the young guys develop. And that's one of the things that I just think Joe Schoen has not done a good enough job of on this team.
Yeah, and you're right about some of those players, but the hardest part is when you're a franchise trying to come up from the bottom, and you get that top 10 pick. And look, everybody in the universe thought that Evan Neal was going to be a good pick for the Giants. And when you have a first round pick and you trade up to make that first round pick, and again, you're a bottom tier franchise trying to make your way up, it hurts so much to the long-term development of a team when you miss on those picks, because then you have to chase fixing that. You have to throw either more draft resources or more money, or you're unable to fill the hole, and you're putting players out there who are hurting you because you drafted them highly and you don't have another choice. So it just hurts so much when when you miss on those top picks. And Wandale, I love Wandale and some of the guys that you mentioned, but missing on those premier picks is just devastating to a rebuild. I've said this before. A team like the Eagles that just won a Super Bowl, okay, a team like the Eagles could take a risk, and it's worked out for them, but they could take a risk on a guy with a checkered resume in a guy like Jalen Carter. They could take a risk on a guy like that because they already had a fantastic roster. And if he hit, he was going to take that fantastic roster to a whole nother level. If he missed, it really wasn't going to hurt them because they already had a tremendous defense in place. A team like the Giants gets set back, to a great degree when you miss on a pick, in the first round of the draft.
Yeah. And I mean, and teams miss on players in the first round of the draft all the time. I think probably no more than half the players picked in round one to actually turn out to be successful NFL players, much less great NFL players. But the Neal one certainly hurt. However, can I interject one positive note in the middle of this terrible
Please do, Tony.
Since you mentioned Evan Neal, and the waste of that number 7 draft pick, and there's no question about that. But as far as Evan Neal himself goes, how much do the Giants miss Evan Neal? And my answer is, did Nick Bonito actually play yesterday? We didn't hear a peep from Nick Bonito, at least during the game. He was chirping online, but in his play, he was stoned by Andrew Thomas, and then they got so frustrated by that they moved him over to the other side. And he didn't really do any better against Jermaine Illuminor, and so the Giants have a pretty good tackle situation, right now, as long as those two guys stay healthy. So thank goodness for that, because otherwise it would be even more devastating that Evan Neal didn't work out.
The maybe the most fun that I had, or one of the fun parts of yesterday's game, was the 31-yard touchdown run by Tyrone Tracy. Andrew Thomas, who not only did another fantastic job pass blocking and frustrated Nick Bonito to the point of the Broncos just moving him to the other side, where he still didn't have any success. He had one quarterback hit and 2 tackles for the entire game, as I'm looking at the stats right now. But on that touchdown run, Tony, I think you and I could have scored on that touchdown run. I, honest to God, think you and I could have scored on that touchdown run. Andrew Thomas blew up the entire side of the Denver defense.
Yeah, and I wrote an article for Big Blue View over the summer, wondering how long it would take Andrew Thomas to return from his Lisfranc injury and how good he'd be when he did return from it, because some guys never really fully come back from Lisfranc injuries to be effective. But Andrew Thomas has been spectacular for the most part this year. I mean, this might be his best season as a pro so far, and he's just amazing. And again, you're talking about Nick Bonito, who's like leading the NFL in sacks, and he did next to nothing yesterday. And as you say, they had to move him to the other side to try to get production out of him. So yeah, you got to find some flowers amidst the the rubble of what happened.
Absolutely. And
He's
Tony, yeah, absolutely. And Tony, we have kind of tiptoed into the offensive side of the ball at this point by beginning to talk about Andrew Thomas and talking a little bit about Wandale. And so let's talk about well, first of all, let's talk about Jackson Dart. And look, Jackson Dart made a horrible decision on the interception. But other than that, and you have to criticize him for that throw. You've got guys hanging onto your feet. At the very least, you just take the sack, make the clock run, force Denver to use its final timeout, and punt the football. And you give them, 60 more yards of field that they have to go through, to get the touchdown that they needed. So he made a horrible mistake. But geez, the game that he played yesterday, all things considered, against a really good defense, he never looked confused. He never looked in over his head. Threw for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. He ran for that score at the end of the game. He leads a drive at the end of the game that should have won the game. If you want something to feel good about, you still have to feel really good about the guy that the Giants are counting on to be their quarterback of the future, because he played an overall terrific football game on Sunday, I thought.
Right. And I agree with all of that from top to bottom. That was a terrible decision he made to throw that ball. And you look at it and say, how could you not see that Sternad was right there in the path of the ball? But
my guess, Tony, my guess was that he saw the guy and thought that he could float the ball over the guy's head.
Yeah.
But with people holding on to his feet,
he couldn't get it high enough.
It's just not a throw that you try to make when you're trying to protect a lead. Yeah. It's just not. But otherwise, otherwise what we saw was fantastic.
Yeah. So he needs to learn not to try to be Superman all the time. But I mean, I don't think he needs to learn it that hard, because I think part of what is making him effective is that he tries to make plays, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easy for me as a fan to just sit there and be wowed by him. But I'm reading all of the analyses by the football intelligentsia out there. People who analyze film and have a lot more experience and knowledge about football than I do. And it's like everyone is excited about this guy, not just people associated with the Giants, but other experts, people whose opinions I respect among NFL analysts are really excited about him. And you're hearing things like about how the Giants are like now kind of like appointment viewing, because their games are so interesting with him at quarterback and with Scatterbo at running back, and I did not see it coming. I mean, I watched him a few times at Ole Miss, and he looked like a nice quarterback, but I didn't see anything that made me think he was going to be like this and like this right away. But he's amazing, right? I mean, you could make the case that he is the top pick in this draft.
I can't really argue with that. I mean, he has been, it's not even the physical skill, okay? Because you can watch the film and you can see the arm talent, and you can see the ability to run, and you see the fact that he looks for contact instead of avoiding contact, and you can see all of the toughness and all of that. But it's the swagger. It's the I'm good enough for this, and my team is good enough for this. And it's just the attitude that, Scatterbo is also bringing it, but everything emanates from the quarterback. And he is changing the attitude, the culture, the belief of the franchise. And that's something that I don't know if any of us knew he could do. And that, that's a skill in and of itself. And I don't think any of us knew that he had that. And we just have a comment in here that said swagger doesn't win games. No, swagger doesn't win games, but belief in yourself, belief in your teammates, confidence, the willingness to say, I don't care about the past. Those things do change locker rooms and change cultures and all of that. And that's what I think that Dart is bringing to the Giants, and Scattaboo as well. It's just a different attitude, a different energy.
Yeah. So I said, let's talk a little bit about swagger. Okay. So swagger as it concerns, all of the kind of, stupid stuff, that, all the kind of playing for the crowd and the cameras and stuff like that, and the posing and, and all of that stuff, that has no effect. But swagger, the aspect of swagger that says, I'm going to make a play to win here, and then to have the skill to actually carry it out, not be afraid to try to make a play, and to have enough skill to be successful making plays. That's the aspect of swagger that is good, rather than does help you win games.
And to have enough, whether you want to use the word swagger or whatever, you want to use the word confidence, belief, whatever word you want to use, to have enough to have teammates believe in you. Okay. There is a different level of play that comes, and this is part of the reason we talked about whether Shane Bowen can stay as defensive coordinator. When you hear teammates talk with reverence about a player, which they do with Jackson Dart, they talk about his energy and it being infectious, and what you see are guys going the extra mile to try to make plays for this guy, going the extra mile to study film to make sure they know what the opponent's going to do, so they can make a block at a key point in time. And it's that belief that the Giants have so quickly developed, that Jackson Dart can take them where they want to go if the rest of them do their jobs.
And I think a lot of that is on the defensive side of the ball, where I think, the Giants have some real quality players on the defensive side of the ball. And I think those real quality players have probably been frustrated for a couple of years, because they're doing their job, getting the ball back to the offense, and then the offense has not been able to do something with it. But when you've got a guy on offense that you feel confident can do something about it, then I think that it gives you more energy on the defensive side of the ball. You say, if we can just get the ball back in his hands, something good may happen.
Absolutely. And, Tony, let's talk about the last 5 minutes, and let's talk about the way that the Giants managed their offense in the last 5 minutes. And you and I had a little bit of this discussion offline. I know that you are not happy with 2 consecutive drives of run, pass, which was basically run, pass, interception, run, pass, punt. Okay. And I get that. And now Tiki Barber, on the other hand, went online and went off on the Giants on the play that Dart threw the interception on, because he said, you don't pass the ball at all there. He said, you've got a 2-possession lead. You run. And on third down, no matter what the yardage is, Denver has 1 timeout. You run again, and you make them use that final timeout, even if you don't get the first down, because then they're out of timeouts. There's 4 minutes left in the game, and they still have to score twice. And I don't know how to feel about any of that, because I can see both arguments. Okay. What bothers me is, if you're going to run, maybe run a little bit more creatively. Okay. Maybe, instead of, I talked to Patrick Chiotti of Believe in Broncos for our crossover preview on the Big Blue View YouTube channel. And the one thing he said is you cannot run right into the gut of this Denver defense. And that's what the Giants tried to do, at the end of the game there. They tried to run right into the gut of the Denver defense, which was obviously sitting up there expecting the run. And the Giants aren't the first team to try to do that. So I don't necessarily know, how to feel about those two drives and whether to kill Daboll for those or not. Like I said, there's differing opinions, but why don't you go ahead and speak to why you felt that the Giants were playing not to lose there on offense.
So I guess my response to Tiki would be, I would agree with him wholeheartedly if the Giants had 2005, 2006 Tiki Barber in the backfield, and if they had the Giants 2005, 2006 offensive line blocking for him. Okay, because they had, Tiki Barber was a rare talent. I mean, he's a borderline Hall of Fame talent, right? And as much as I love Scatterboo and I like Tyrone Tracy, they're not Tiki Barber. Okay, so I that's my first thing. And while the Giants have been doing a better job, I think, of run blocking the last few weeks, they are still not a great run blocking line. They are not the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles offensive line when it comes to run blocking, just opening gigantic holes and just pushing the ball down your throat. So I think you have to be aware of what the skill of your own players is and ask, whether you're bound to be successful. I think, you make a great point, though, about you don't just run into the middle of a line against a very stout run defensive line like the one that Denver has. The other thing that I would say is that by the time you get to third down, it's almost too late to pass. I feel like if you are going to throw in that situation, then you do it on first or second down, and you still have to be somewhat aggressive in that situation, especially knowing that your two of your top pass defenders are now on the sideline, so that when Denver gets the ball back, they're not going to be facing some of your best players. So that's why I think it's not a good look for the Giants, but absolutely the types of running plays that they made were just not what I wanted to see. I feel like there were safe passes that you could make with a little rollout to just pitch and catch with say Scatterboo, for example, or with one of the tight ends to just pick up a few yards here, a few yards there, and then maybe eventually put yourself in position to make the third down and keep the ball. But that's me. I've always believed that you try to hold on to the ball there rather than just trying to run some clock.
Yeah, and I guess part of it is having a rookie quarterback too, and but I could see, even on second down, you throw a swing pass, just swing the ball out, swing the ball out, and see if you can make space for Wan'Dale Robinson, or make space for Tracy, or make space for Scatterboo to make a play. That I can see. But
yeah, I'm not talking about going downfield with it. I'm just talking about pick up a few easy yards.
But when you think about it, if Dart doesn't overthrow Wan'Dale Robinson, and Dart doesn't overthrow Jalen Hyatt, on those two plays late in the game, the Giants still win the game because both of those are touchdowns.
Yep.
And it's funny because I watch those two plays, and I love what Jackson Dart brings to the table, but every time I see Jackson Dart, and he's done it a few times now in his 4 starts, every time I see Jackson Dart miss on a deep ball, I think about Matt Waldman of the rookie scouting portfolio, who banged the table and told me over and over and over and over before the draft that the biggest weakness in Jackson Dart's game is accuracy on the deep ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch him miss wide open guys down the field like that, and I have a hard time arguing with that. You know, it's just if you hit one of those, it's a different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
And but I, you know, or like I said, I think maybe the idea is you maybe don't throw a pass that's a risky pass in the middle of the field. You throw something that's a swing pass or a bubble screen or something that you know is going to get completed. You don't take a risk in the middle of the field like that. So, you know, the thing that I wrote this morning, Tony, that goes beyond offense and goes beyond arguing about whether the Giants were too conservative is Brian Daboll. Look, we all want Brian Daboll to succeed with Jackson Dart. At least I think we do, because the Giants as an organization understand that they didn't do Daniel Jones any favors. They went through Pat Shermer. They fired Pat Shermer after Jackson Dart's rookie year. They made a mistake bringing in Joe Judge. That ended up being a disastrous hire. The Joe Judge, Jason Garrett combo, that was disastrous for Daniel Jones. They go through and, you know, they end up with a firing the general manager that drafted Jones. God knows how many offensive coordinators he went through. The Giants don't want to do that to Jackson Dart. But here's what I keep coming back to with Brian Daboll. We can argue about, was this the right decision? Was that the right decision? 2.5 years now of watching the Giants either in way too many instances come out and be unprepared, uncompetitive, and get embarrassed. Even week 1 this year against Washington, which is a team that's not the Washington Commanders of last year. I think we've clearly seen that. A Washington team that was very vulnerable week 1, and the Giants weren't competitive. So we see too many instances of that. And we see too many games, I think, where, you know, you go Carolina last year, New Orleans this year. You know, if I went back through the schedule, I'm sure I could find other examples. You just go back and you think, how did they lose that game? How were they not able to win that game? You know, and you can dissect decisions, and, you know, too many of these things are happening on Brian Daboll's watch. And I don't think, you know, one game isn't always the same as the next, but that in the end is going to be the argument for why Brian Daboll gets fired at the end of the year, if he gets fired. Because that team a year ago, they were 3-14, but they were better than 3-14. Okay. They should not have lost 14 football games. Maybe they only should have won 6, but 6 is a lot better than 3. Okay. And this football team should not be 2-5. This football team should be 4-3, maybe 5-2. If you come out prepared in week 1, you beat the Washington Commanders because they were there to be taken. You should have beaten Dallas. You should have won yesterday. There's very little excuse for the way that they played in New Orleans. So this team should easily have a winning record right now. And I don't know why or how these things keep happening, with on Brian Daboll's watch.
Yeah, and you list all those games that you mentioned, and you realize that the Giants should be traveling to Philadelphia next Sunday, playing for the division lead. And if you think about how outrageous an idea that is, going back to the summer when people were talking about the Giants' horrendous strength of schedule, and about how all of the good teams were front loaded into the first half of the season, and that are there any games the Giants can win in the first half of the season? Yeah, well, maybe the New Orleans game. And you look at them, and they're sitting here with 2 wins, and you say they definitely should have won yesterday, given the way things were. They definitely should have won the Cowboys game, given the way the end of that played out. And so, at a minimum, they should be sitting here today at 4-3, and going to Philadelphia trying to catch the Eagles for first place in the NFC East. So, in a way, it's remarkable what they've done this season, given how difficult we all thought their schedule was. And I should just say, about yesterday's game, for whatever criticism of Jackson Dart, you'd like to make, or in my case, the criticism of them, the conservative play calling at the end with running the ball, and instead of trying to be more aggressive to hold on to the ball. I mean, the fact is that they put 32 points on the board against what people were saying was one of the best defenses in the NFL, and doing it in their stadium, in the rarefied air. And by the way, I haven't heard, I think, anybody mention this yet, but I wonder how much that 33-point fourth quarter that Denver put up had something to do with the Giants defense just being gassed a little bit in the fourth quarter and not being able to quite keep up with things. And I haven't heard anyone talk about that. But anyway, the fact is, 32 points on that Denver defense is not a bad showing at all. And so but it makes it all the more frustrating that they only have 2 wins, because as you alluded to, the opportunities have been there to win almost every week.
Absolutely. And I did want to, I'm watching the comments scroll by, and there was one in here that says it's not Daboll's fault that the defense flatlined at the end of the game. And maybe not per se, but here's where I'm going to argue with that. Who hired the defensive coordinator? Okay. Whose choice was it to hire Shane Bowen? Basically by looking at Bowen's run stats, from Tennessee. Whose choice was it after John Mara was blatantly critical of the 2024 defense? And I understood the choice, but whose choice was it to keep Shane Bowen as the defensive coordinator this year as well? Those were Brian Daboll decisions. So maybe he's not directly responsible for what happened in the fourth quarter on Sunday, because he wasn't the guy making the play call decisions. But the defensive coordinator is Brian Daboll's choice. So by extension, you can pin some of that blame on Daboll as well, at least in my view.
And I wonder if, at the end of a game, can the head coach say to the defensive coordinator, "I'd like to see us be aggressive here instead of passive"?
Well,
after the lesson we learned in Dallas, I hope we're not going to be too passive with this.
The deal is, these guys wear headsets, and these headsets communicate with each other. And you're 100% right, Tony, because in between plays, there probably isn't time and for a head coach to, because he hears the play call, there probably isn't time for the head coach to call a timeout or to overrule and say, no, call something different, because you've got to get the play in because some stuff is happening quickly. What there is, though, is before you go out on the field for a given series, you lean into the headset, you lean into the microphone, and you say, "Hey, Shane, be aggressive, rush the passer," you know, or you say to Kafka, if you want, you say to Kafka, "Hey, we're milking the clock, but don't be afraid to throw the ball on second down, or don't be afraid to take a shot on first down," um, and put that out there that you're okay with it if we take a shot, but that's when the head coach can, can lean in and make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, Tony. We could probably talk about this one for a long time, but we've already talked about it for an hour. Mike, I guess the only other thing that I think we should probably talk about is, where do they go from here? What now? I mean, do we see a change on the coaching staff? Do we see this team 2-5 should be better than that? Do we see this team, flatline, fray at the edges and tail off to another 3 or 4 win season? What do we see now? I think that's the fascinating question now. I mean, you're walking into a hornet's nest with an angry Eagles team this coming week, and I can't expect the Giants to sweep the Eagles in a season. I just can't. But I am very interested to see just the energy, the attitude. I'm interested to see what we get from the Giants, this coming Sunday and going forward after that.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you're gonna can the defensive coordinator, who do you replace him with? It's always easy to say, get rid of this, get rid of that, but you're not going to bring someone outside in the middle of the season on 1 week's
No,
notice
you're
to
not.
be the defensive coordinator for your team. So it's got to be somebody who's already on the staff. And is there anybody on the staff that you think would be right as the defensive coordinator and would want to do it? I mean, you could say, oh, well, somebody like Andre Patterson, a very experienced guy, respected probably across the team for his work, but I don't know if Andre Patterson wants anything to do with being the defensive coordinator. I have a feeling he likes kind of doing the job that he's doing. They've got a new secondary coach, and so it's like, well, where's the guy who's going to take over for Bowen? And so it would be satisfying to see them sack Bowen, because I think it's been very frustrating watching how he does the defense. But when you get to the point of figuring out who should be there, well, that's more of an off-season thing, unless there's somebody that I don't realize there on the defensive staff that would logically be able to step in, and maybe there is. I just don't know who that person would be.
Yeah, on the staff, it's either got to be Andre Patterson, or it's got to be Marquand Manuel, the defensive backs coach. Patterson years ago was bypassed for a couple of opportunities to be a defensive coordinator. But and he would be a good choice on an interim basis, for the simple reason that he is respected by everybody. And I think in a very fragile situation, where guys are hurt at this point, and they're hurt because they know they should be better. They know that what they've been getting hasn't been what it needs to be, in terms of some of the calls that they've been getting. And in a really fragile situation, I think Andre Patterson, could be a good choice. As you said, the question is, at 65, probably near the end of his coaching career, does he really want that? Marquand Manuel is the only other guy on staff who's got some coordinator experience. I don't know. I don't know if he would be a good choice. I don't really know how well he did as a defensive coordinator in the past. I just know that he's done it. So Not a lot of good choices there.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say about Andre Patterson, I mean, if he was willing to do it, is I have to think that that would make the defensive line guys very happy, even though they'd be losing him as their position coach. I bet that Brian Burns would say to himself, "Well, Andre Patterson's not going to rush 3 and drop 8 with the game on the line."
No, absolutely. And like I said, I don't see
would have me and Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter out there with the game on the line. So that so they might react very positively to that. And I think it's an issue because those guys who are physically spent and now I think emotionally spent after that game, it would be the type of move that might sit very well with them. And I know absolutely nothing about Marquand Manuel, so I can't even comment on what that would be. But something needs to happen, and if it's not a change in position, then I feel like Daboll has to sit down with Bowen and just say, I need you to be more aggressive than you're being, because we're letting these teams come back on us when they shouldn't.
Yeah,
and I know you got injuries in the secondary and all of that, but like you gotta play to win the game. And rushing the passer is how you win games.
Absolutely, especially when that's the strength of your team. You play to the strength of your team, and the Giants defensively didn't do that at the end of yesterday's game. So, Tony, I do think we've gone on quite long enough. I appreciate it. The Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.